Another installment of the 2022 Louisville Football Position Previews. On this episode, the tight ends and offensive line. We will talk about those two positions on this episode of the show. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into this bonus episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credentialed media member for Cardinals Sports Zone. Also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time, as always, to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. As I mentioned, we are finishing up the offensive side of the 2022 Louisville Football Positional Preview series. We will combine the tight ends and the offensive line positions on this episode of the show because, like I said, we are still in the off season, so there probably won't be an episode for the first week of July, so we will go ahead and get it wrapped up for the end of June. We'll start out with the tight ends in the first segment, discussing the depth chart, offensive line. Speaking in the second segment, we will discuss what could the possible two deep look like there. And then the final segment of the show, we will go into some under-the-radar possible breakout stars. But so we'll start out with the tight ends. This one really isn't all that difficult to predict. Marshon Ford is back with the program. And look, I'm going to say something, and there's going to be people that are going to think I'm crazy. Marshon Ford is the best tight end in the ACC. Marshon Ford will be one of the first 5 tight ends to be drafted in next year's NFL draft. Those are my predictions. Well, that's my belief, and then that's my prediction, as a result of that. Marshon Ford last season was Malik Cunningham's security blanket. 49 receptions, 550 yards, only 2 touchdowns, but averaged 11.2 yards per reception. In 2019, he had 7 touchdowns. 2020, he had 6. I really think that last year was kind of more of an indication of Malik Cunningham really taking matters into his own hands in the red zone, and that really showed with his 20 rushing touchdowns compared to just 19 through the air. So don't let maybe the lack of opportunity or the lack of volume, take away the fact that Marshon Ford is one of the most talented tight ends in the country. In my opinion, he is a top 5 tight end in the country. He is the best tight end in the ACC, in my opinion. A phrase that I said all throughout last year that, look, I completely believe. If you are big enough, in terms of physicality and frame and stuff like that, if you are big enough to guard Marshon Ford, you are not quick enough to guard Marshon Ford. Excuse me. And to play the devil's advocate, if you are quick enough to guard Marshon Ford, you are not big enough to guard Marshon Ford. He is a matchup nightmare for both opposing defensive backs and opposing linebackers. Only a handful of players can really truly match up with him, both size and speed. It's one of those instances to where Scott Satterfield uses him in a lot of different ways. Not only is he used as a traditional tight end in some sets, but he's like more of an H-back, as they call it. Very, very instrumental in the run, kind of plays as a fullback at times, out wide. I know Gunter Brewer, the old wide receiver coach, said before the season last year, look, we are going to use Marshon Ford out wide. Some of it is because his skill set warrants it. Also, some of it because we have to, because we have, a lot of inexperience at the wide receiver position, and you have to wonder if that same parallel is going to be drawn to this season as well, to where, yes, maybe you have guys like Braden Smith, Amari Huggins-Bruce, even guys like Tyler Hudson and D. Wiggins that you'll have some experience at the Power 5 level, but they're still as a whole, still trying to figure it out and trying to have guys step up. So at the end of the day, I think that, Marshon Ford is the guy that you're looking for. And it's like, okay, he is the tight end position for Louisville. And that's no disrespect to the other guys, because I think, they have some, solid younger guys in the program as well. And it is a program that does use two tight ends at times, especially to block. But Marshon Ford, one of the most dynamic, receivers, especially at the tight end position in the conference. I think that, even if the statistics might not necessarily back it up, excuse me. Even if maybe the statistics don't necessarily truly support that narrative, I think once you watch the eye test, you understand that it's so difficult to guard Marshon Ford. It's so difficult to stay in front of him, and he's just a matchup nightmare. So, obviously, Marshon Ford, number one on the depth chart for me. And like I mentioned, it's an instance to where the Cardinals a lot of times play two tight ends. So, there's some room for guys like, in my opinion, the backup or the number two, in my opinion, Isaac Martin is a guy last year that played a good amount of time. He's played a lot of snaps as a blocker. Dwayne Martin is another player. Des Melton caught a couple passes last year, the redshirt sophomore. So, in my opinion, that's kind of where, the backup position lies. Isaac Martin, Des Melton, Dwayne Martin is where you're going to see most of those guys, probably playing in a backup situation. I think Christian Pederson, redshirt freshman, is probably maybe has the highest upside as a receiving tight end in this situation. I know a lot of times Scott Satterfield's bringing these tight ends to block, but I think that Christian Pederson is a player that maybe has the most upside as a true pass catcher, and not to mention the three-star tight end that they just took in this past year's class, Nate Kariski, who's a freshman. There's been a lot of praise for him, over the spring and over the summer, since he's gotten into the program. So, there's a lot of competition. In my opinion, it's one of those instances to where I think that, Isaac Martin, Des Melton, and Dwayne Martin, guys that have played the most in of the six. I'm sorry, of the five, I guess you could really say the backup tight end positions. I think that's probably, where you're going to be competing for that backup. And a lot of it is just going to be, separating yourself from the others, because it seems like, you have Marshon Ford, and then behind him, it's like, okay, who's going to stand out? And I know the opportunity sometimes isn't there, and the targets aren't there, and you don't necessarily get the opportunity to truly prove yourself and stuff like that. I think Des Melton did a good job of proving it when his number was called this year. Isaac Martin and Dwayne Martin are kind of security blankets in that sense, because they're so good blocking and things of that nature, to where sometimes when Louisville plays that, that two tight end, those two tight end settings, a lot of times it's for blocking, running, the left end, right end, trying to get outside the tackle and stuff like that. So, I think that Marshon Ford is the number one for sure, and there's no debating that, and that's not up really for debate. No one should be debating that. But after that, in the depth chart, you're going to be looking at this from a sense of, okay, who's going to separate themselves in this group, because any of these guys can do it. I think that Des Melton and Christian Pederson are probably your best receiving options in terms of, if, maybe Marshon Ford gets used in a different way, to where they, might move him to a different role, which, I mean, obviously only 11 players can be on the field at one time. Only a fraction of those are skill positions. But at the end of the day, if you wanted to, use another receiving option, I think Des Melton and Christian Pederson are your best bets. Nate Kariski is probably right behind them. Has some blocking, advantages as well. And then, you have guys that have played a lot of snaps like Dwayne Martin and Isaac Martin that are going to be used throughout the season for, two tight end blocking and things of that nature. And they can also receive as well. So, Marshon Ford, obviously the number one on the depth chart, but you're looking at a couple different possibilities that you could go with behind him. So, you have your clear-cut starter, and then you have, a lot of capable backups. Offensive line's kind of like that as well in certain positions. We're going to talk about the possible depth chart for the Louisville Cardinals on the offensive line here in just a second. I will say that, Vic Mullen is also on the roster. Vic is a player that's very good blocking as well. The only reason I haven't mentioned him because it seems like there's Jody Demling of Cardinal Authority reported that he was hearing that Vic Mullen was going to be, I think, possibly no longer with the team due to a medical issue, or maybe out for the season. Look, I want to state for the record that is just what I've heard. That is a rumor that I obviously cannot confirm nor deny. He is on the roster. If he is with the team, he offers one of the best blocking options, so that's something to focus on. He's a bigger guy, I believe 6'7", in that range, so you have that size as well and the underrated ability to make guys miss in the second level. So I think Vic Mullen could be another solid receiving option like Christian Pederson, but I do at least want to let you all know that there are some rumors out there that Vic Mullen might be having a medical issue that could prevent him from playing this season for the Cardinals. But I'm going to say it just as that. It's a rumor. I have no inside info whether or not it is true, but I did want to address it. So moving forward on to the offensive line position, there's a lot of standouts that are coming back and a lot of experienced depth along the way. We will discuss both of those here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer? Choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry when you have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. It allows you to save time and money. So, it's a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Prices are reliably low for every customer, and they have everything you can need from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today or to find the solution to your auto parts needs. That is rockauto.com. Right now, see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. So the Louisville offensive line position is one of the most experienced units coming back into the season. And if you think about how different things were from 2018 when the cupboard was absolutely depleted, Scott Satterfield and company have done a great job of completely transforming the trenches on both sides of the ball, but specifically on the offensive side. Depth chart-wise, it's pretty straightforward. Let's look at the locks that you have. You have Bryan Hudson that's going to be starting at center more than likely. You have preseason All-American Caleb Chandler at guard. Adonis Boone will likely be one of the starting guards. Trevor Reid will possibly be a starter at left tackle, or maybe Michael Gonzalez, and you also have Renato Brown at the other tackle position. So you have you're basically all but Cole Bentley back. 7 players that are on this roster right now played at least or started at least one game. So there's a lot of experience coming back. Caleb Chandler, in my opinion, he's the best offensive guard in the ACC, and he has the best chance of all the Louisville football players overall to be a first-round selection in next April's NFL draft. I'm not saying he's going to be, but I am saying that he has the best ability to be, just because of his. I think that he's very, very solid in the run, but he's also very solid in pass block as well. So overall, you have a lot of versatility, especially at the center position in Bryan Hudson. Adonis Boone has started a lot of games as well. I know Trevor Reid was the starting left tackle last year. True freshman Michael Gonzalez came in and completely blew a lot of people away. So having that competition at left tackle is something to focus on. And obviously protecting Malik Cunningham's blind spot is priority number 1 for the offensive line. Right tackle Renato Brown was able to kind of put it together as the season went on last year. There is a new offensive line coach, and Nick Cardwell, who was going to be the tight ends coach and now is the offensive line coach. Josh Stepp is the new tight ends coach. So, new coaches at both positions. I'm feeling very, very good about the offensive line, starters wise. I mean, I think it's going to be one of the better units in the ACC as a whole. But what separates this unit from units in the past is the quality depth that they have. So you have one of, Trevor Reid or Michael Gonzalez not starting. So you have them in the two deep. You also have some players like Luke Kandra, a true sophomore that you could see, playing some big time snaps. Moving on down the list, Josh Black is one that I'm looking to take the next step forward, a redshirt sophomore. Austin Collins, also a redshirt freshman. Kobe Baines and Aaron Gunn were in the last year's class as well. We're going to see if either those two guys can crack the two deep. And also, there's 4 freshmen coming in: Isaiah Reed, Sam Seacrest, Max Cabana, and I think it's Maquette. Is it Guay? There's a player for Spalding that played soccer named Mamadou Gay, and it was spelled the same way, Gueye. So I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. But there's some solid players that are coming into the program. Isaiah Reed, I'm very, very excited for. I think that he is a guy that has a collegiate ready frame that he could possibly give you some solid snaps next season. But having 15 guys on the offensive line, scholarship wise, you're looking for probably, 8 to 10 guys that you can truly trust. 10 might be a little bit optimistic, but 8 guys is definitely something that because you have to factor in injuries and things of that nature. But you feel good about your starting unit. There is a competition for left tackle, but that's not necessarily as much as trying to prove that either one is capable of being left tackle, but it's like it's a different sense because it's okay. Both of these guys are battle tested. It's just a matter of which one is going to surpass the other, and they're both going to play some solid snaps. I'm very, very intrigued by the interior, running in between the tackles, because you have Caleb Chandler, you have Adonis Boone. And worst case scenario, you have a guy like Bryan Hudson who can also play guard. He can play multiple spots on the offensive line, but he's going to slide in at center for Cole Bentley. So, it's a seamless transition. And then you have Renato Brown at the right tackle. Luke Kandra is a player that I think is going to be playing a lot as a true sophomore for this squad. So very, very interested there. And then you have some other guys that, have been redshirted, and then 4 true freshmen that, realistically, you could see 1 to 2 or maybe even 3 of these guys redshirt, or maybe even 4 if we're being completely honest. But I do think that, they definitely have the opportunity to surprise some people. So, really, really intrigued to see what happens there in that position room. But as I mentioned, the starters are pretty much defined for both the tight ends and the offensive line position units. But there are some under-the-radar breakout stars that I do want to focus on. We will do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering info, including live betting, esports, and more. And it's the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. So heading into the last segment, this is something that I've been doing for the past position previews, is talking about some of the under the radar, possible breakout stars. We're going to have, we'll have, maybe 1 to 2. We'll have 1 for the tight end position and 2 for the offensive line position. For the tight end position, I'm going to go with Christian Pederson. Like I mentioned, I think he's one of the best receiving options that the Cardinals have, outside of, Marshon Ford. Obviously, he was ranked just outside of the top 1,000 in the 2021 class, 6'5", 230 pounds, coming out of high school, California native. I just think overall, with his footwork and his ability to really get into the second line of the defense, I'm very, very excited for what he has to bring to the table. I'm looking forward to, seeing if he can crack the depth chart to be able to put those on display. I think he might not necessarily be as good of a blocker as maybe like Isaac Martin or Dwayne Martin or Des Melton, but I do think that he is one of the better receiving options that the Cardinals have at the position. Des Melton's another guy that I'm looking at like, okay, he's a player that, has shown the ability to be, solid in terms of catching the football when his number is called. And then, like I mentioned, there's been the staff raving about Nate Kariski, the true freshman tight end coming in. So Christian Pederson's kind of, like my number one breakout star, but also you have Nate Kariski, who could possibly be like a 1B to Pederson's 1A. But I will say that the opportunity's definitely limited because Louisville's not necessarily that big of a passing team. Anyway, they run the ball a lot. When they do pass, you have Amari Huggins, Bruce, Braden Smith, Tyler Hudson, all the wide receivers to contend with in terms of targets, but also the best tight end in the ACC, and Marshon Ford, who's going to demand his targets as he should, who's going to get a lot of looks, and the opportunities just might not necessarily be there until Marshon Ford graduates. So we will see what that looks like. But if there was going to be a breakout star, I would feel comfortable by saying it would be Christian Pederson. Moving on to the offensive line, we mentioned one. I think Luke Kandra is probably number one in my opinion. He was ranked as the 643rd best player in the 2019 class. I'm listed as a sophomore. I think he's actually, is it a COVID sophomore? But overall, I think that this is an instance to where, he could definitely be in the two deep at the guard position, backing up Caleb Chandler or Adonis Boone, 6'4", 290 pounds, listed, on the 24/7 Sports website. I'm not sure if that is accurate, but I do think Kandra is a player that is going to see a good amount of time. He had a very solid season last year, to where he played some solid snaps at the end of the season, and I think moving forward, this is going to be an instance to where we are going to see him play some significant spots. Another guy, he's not necessarily in this list. Or not necessarily in the list, in my opinion. I think Austin Collins, this is a year that you're looking for him to see what he can do. Offensive tackle, also in that 2019 class. I'm sorry, he's in the 2020 class. Ultimately, I think that it's going to be an instance to where you're going to be looking for him to try to make the next step forward as well. But in my opinion, the number one breakout star is Michael Gonzalez. Michael Gonzalez came in last season, a part of the 2021 class, just outside of the top 700, 6'4", a little under 300 pounds, native of North Carolina. The film for Michael Gonzalez was something that kind of caught my eye. I was like, oh, wow, he's definitely seems to be a little better on film than maybe the recruiting rankings suggest. But, came in right away and made a lasting impression on the team and on the coaching staff, and contended for snaps at left tackle. And obviously left tackle is kind of up in the air. Trevor Reid seems like he's probably, possibly going to be the starter, the veteran at the position. But Michael Gonzalez definitely had time there last season. And this was an instance to where I think that he is going to take the next step forward. He's going to be the guy when you look at the left side of the line and you see, Caleb Chandler, you look at the line as a whole and you see Caleb Chandler being, one of the strongholds on the offensive line. And then you look at the left side and you got Michael Gonzalez anchoring down and being, the blind side blocker. I think, the occasion is there to be risen to. And I think that Michael Gonzalez, in my opinion, is going to see the biggest jump from year one to year two. And we're going to see, we're going to be heading into year three talking about Michael Gonzalez as a possible all ACC preseason level guy. That's just how confident I have in him, how confident I am in him and his progression moving forward. So, talked about the depth charts for both the tight ends and the offensive line position units. Also talked about some of the guys that are flying under the radar. Maybe Michael Gonzalez isn't necessarily flying under the radar, but I do think he is definitely going to be the breakout star alongside of offensive guard Luke Kandra. Tight end wise, in my opinion, it is Christian Pederson. definitely want to take this time, as always, to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Locked On Louisville is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. Do yourself a favor, check out the Locked On ACC podcast hosted by Candace Cooper. She does a fantastic job of, just interpreting and discussing the landscape as a whole throughout the conference. Does a great job of covering all of the 14 squads in the Atlantic Coast Conference. So be sure to check out that podcast to see her opinions on the University of Louisville or for some future opponents. So, like I said, that's going to wrap up the last episode of the month. I appreciate everyone for tuning in this month. We'll probably take about a week off or so. Come back the second week of July. It's still being off season, so there's only going to be about 12 episodes in the month of July like there were in June. So just keep in mind to make a mental note. So I do apologize for the absence, but I'm going to take a little break, take a little vacation. If you have any content ideas, definitely feel free to hit me up. But if not, everyone be safe on this holiday weekend. Have a great day. Have a great week or so. We will see you right back here in a couple weeks.